Gunjan, let me start with you a little bit. Bank of America wrote up this big note about watching the options and what they indicate. What are you seeing with the options on Nvidia?
That's right, Contessa. The financial markets Super Bowl is here, and options traders are positioning for a mammoth move in Nvidia stock after it reports today. They're pricing in around a 12% move in the stock. That's tomorrow alone. And just putting that number into context, the average move over the past 8 earnings releases has been around 9% up or down, and a 12% move would be a move of around $400 billion for Nvidia. So people are really bracing for fireworks after this report today.
You're looking at a company that now has about $3.5 trillion in market value. It's up almost 200% this year. Beth, when you're looking at the fundamentals of this company and where it could go, what gets your attention?
Oh, wow. So many things get my attention right now. I guess first and foremost, big tech CapEx continues to grow. We're tracking over 200 billion this year. We'll be over 300 billion next year. You cannot understate, or you cannot overstate the importance of this, because this is where all the demand is coming from. They continue to spend. Secondly, when you go and look at pricing power, Hopper was priced about 40% lower than what we're tracking for Blackwell right now. So when you look at the demand signals, you look at the pricing power, and then what you want to layer in is the supply chain signals. We're actually on the other side of that debate around whether there are supply chain issues or not. What I'm seeing from Taiwan Semiconductor right now is a surge in their high performance computing segment. As a fab that I've watched very closely, their numbers are indicating that 2025 is going to be a very big year for AI and for Nvidia.
Research, and I love the note you put out on Nvidia, and I liked it because it was just complex and it was just like cool stuff. So take us through how someone like you and your background, how do you approach an Nvidia earnings day?
Sure. First we'll start with the Nvidia itself. Implied move tonight on earnings is about 8.25%, which on the surface you look at it and say, okay, it's Nvidia 8.25. It seems pretty fair. I look back the last 5 quarters, the average move was 7%, so 8% justified. However, a little digger, deep into those numbers, 2 of those quarters, you had a 16% jump in February when the stock was 67. The stock's now 147. You had a big jump in May when the stock was 95, and now again 147. So it's going to be a lot harder when you have the 120% gain since February, the 55% gain since May, to get that type of move on the number. Not to mention, at a 3.6 trillion market cap now,
huge.
Yeah, versus again back in February the market cap was closer to, call it, 1.5 trillion in May. So the law of numbers starts to work against it. Now, I'm not saying that the stock can't have another big move, but when you have a $3.6 trillion stock and you've had the success that the stock has had year to date, it just gets harder and harder to keep kind of, getting higher, especially when the bar is raised where it's been.
Are you concerned at all about the reported problems with overheating in the servers?
Not concerned at all. It is well understood that Blackwell is pushing the outer limits of what AI chips are capable of. So it is assumed that there will be need for new components, new processes. It's called CoWoS capacity at Taiwan Semi. Those things are assumed with the fact that they are pushing that upper limit of capabilities. In addition to pushing the upper limit of the capabilities of AI chips, they will also be pushing the upper limit of revenue next year. So when you look at it combined, this is the kind of thing, as an investor, I want to see.
Analysts are expecting about $33 billion in revenue, which would be 83% growth over last year. What we have seen in the past is that when Nvidia moves, not only does it move the whole market, but specific companies in that sphere. Gunjan, which companies are you looking at? If you see those massive moves that the options are indicating, which other companies could move in tandem?
Definitely, Contessa. I mean, I think one thing that makes NVIDIA's earnings so important, and to your point, people do watch this and parse the leaders' comments as they might Fed Chair Jerome Powell's comments, because it's such an important indicator for the broader AI trade and the semiconductor sector overall. So I think people are going to be watching companies throughout that sector, even the Magnificent Seven, for clues after this earnings report.
But Beth, you point out that this is not even close to even the rest of the Mag 7, especially in terms of the profit margins for this company.
Oh, absolutely. It's not only the top line that separates NVIDIA, it's also that operating margin and the cash flow. It is double the majority of the Mag 7, double Apple, double Google, 17 points ahead of the second place winner, Microsoft. However, I do want to say that Q3 is somewhat irrelevant. All eyes should be on 2025. This is when Blackwell is arriving. It's really, really important for investors to understand that at this point, we're 7 quarters into the last generation of GPUs. The new generation is coming out, and that's what investors should be focused on.
How do you approach NVIDIA? Because I think a lot of folks, when they go to Yahoo Finance, they see NVIDIA, they'll look at P ratios, they'll look at multiples, they'll study earnings and profit trends. But I imagine, given your trading background, like, you approach it a different way. Like, what screens do you set up? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I look at volatility for, that's my go-to, and kind of, like I said, I'll look at the implied move first. I'll look at what the stock has done in the past, and then I'll look at where, not just where the weekly vol, the at-the-money straddle, that's again 8.25% move, but I'll look at further months as well, and then from there I'll kind of dictate, to myself, what's the best trade. So that being said, I'm kind of not in favor of buying expensive weekly vol here, again, just because of the size of the company. It's getting harder to move. Unless you really think it's going to have a dive, you probably want to stay away from expensive vol. So I'll look at December vol, I'll look at January, and I'll see what stands out to me the most. And after doing that, if we're looking at NVIDIA itself, I think that buying vol in December or January, depending on the viewpoint and how you want to play it, makes a lot more sense. Typically, the December and January vol is trading about around 45.50. That's in line with realized vol. So typically what happens on an earnings event is the earnings come out and volatility collapses down to where realized vol is. Well, you have realized vol trading in NVIDIA, the 30-day and 60-day vol, pretty close to where January and December are. So I don't think we're going to see that huge vol contraction that you would see if you bought the weekly options and then the vol collapse.
We'll move on to our trades today because it's NVIDIA day, and one we certainly want to spend a lot of time on, NVIDIA. Think about it like this. There are watch parties forming this afternoon in New York City to watch the NVIDIA's earnings release. It is a macroeconomic event happening today. Why? Think about the number of large companies that NVIDIA affects. They're big customers. Of course, AMD is one of their competitors. Microsoft, Tesla, Meta, Amazon, Google Alphabet, Oracle, OpenAI, xAI, Dell, Supermicro, all these companies. And there's more. I could name a list of 20 more companies that are directly affected by NVIDIA's earnings today and will move with NVIDIA. So NVIDIA's earnings today, a macroeconomic event that you have to pay attention to. Remember, earlier, a short time ago, Jensen Huang referred to the demand for NVIDIA Blackwell chips as insane. He also came out and said that their Blackwell chips are sold out. So I believe there will be a day where NVIDIA's demand starts to decelerate. That is the absolute, that date is coming. I just don't think it's now. I don't think that this is the one. And the other thing is, NVIDIA, if you look, it traded at over $140 in June 20th. It broke $140 and has either traded lower or consolidated ever since then, like NVIDIA has been known to do. Can it break through to higher numbers? Well, if the demand really is insane, if the earnings beat and the revenue beat is significant enough, and the news and the guidance from Jensen Huang is significant enough, remember, it's consolidated for months on end here. So I think there's a real opportunity here, but there is a high bar. right? I mean, remember the revenue, whatever the number is, whatever that number that the consensus is, I think it's $32.5 billion. They've got to beat probably by $2 billion. They've got to beat on earnings per share. They've got to beat on revenue, and they've got to raise the expectations going forward. Now, here's why that might happen. Morgan Stanley thinks that the revenue from the Blackwell chip for the fourth quarter will be $5 to $6 billion. Spear Invest thinks it could be 12 to 13 billion. There's your big play between how much revenue is coming in from Blackwell in the fourth quarter. Remember, this is a chip that has been slightly delayed from September to now. They're just starting to roll it out. And remember, it's the Hopper chip leading to the Blackwell chip that's coming out now. And then the Rubin chip, Jensen Huang has said, is in the future and getting ready to go. So they've got chips lined up. This is an incredible business story, but let's talk about the high bar. We talk about it a lot on the air here at the Schwab Network. The high bar in an
NVIDIA investor, and these people, we talk to these folks all the time. They love NVIDIA. They are obsessed with NVIDIA. I mean, the stock has made them a ton of money the past 5 years, even the past year. Should they be taking more of their cue right now from the weakness in semiconductors more broadly? Are they what I'm trying to get to is semiconductors suggesting something brewing for NVIDIA?
Yes, but the argument that I think the bulls will have is say, well, it's a different industry, the AI growth, the capital spending that we're seeing from the major companies. So maybe we are seeing that spread between NVIDIA and the rest of the complex is deserved because of the growth and the money going there. Not to mention, probably as we see weakness in some of those other semiconductor names, the money will funnel towards what's working, which is basically NVIDIA in that space. So I think it's going to be more of an if-then. We'll see how the earnings play out. If the earnings disappoint our guidance or the expectations were too high, then the bears will say, see, the other semiconductor stocks were signaling that. And if it's bullish, then the bulls will argue, see, where we shouldn't be kind of grouped in that same category, which is why the earnings, again, are always important.
People are
Hi, Nicole.
here waiting with bated breath to see what happens with Nvidia and how that could drive the market for the rest of the year. Would you agree with that? How it goes, Nvidia could go the market?
Well, I think so, Nicole. I mean, today is definitely Nvidia today. If Nvidia doesn't beat numbers and top the whisper number, I think the world's going to come to an end. But I'm just kidding. But yeah, all eyes will be on Nvidia. Also, it's a great barometer of what's happening in the chip space, how the whole AI play is working out, and just tech in general. Is all this CapEx that these hyperscalers are spending money on to upgrade their data centers, how is that impacting, Nvidia? So huge day today. Spotlight definitely on Nvidia.
Yeah. People, you mentioned the whisper numbers. We were talking about that in the break. And sometimes you'll see a company with a double beat and a raise, and it still sells off. I mean, it's been an incredible performer, up 192% this year. If that were to happen, would you be buying into Nvidia at this point? I mean, because we know people are, I think, naming their kids Jensen now. I think it may be in the top 10 names.
Yeah, it's interesting, Nicole. I mean, the consensus estimate for this upcoming third quarter is about $33 billion. We know that at the end of the second quarter, they guided to $32.5 billion. And of course, the whisper number is usually about $2 billion more in revenues than what the expectations are. So that puts it around, $35 billion. You go into the fourth quarter, consensus is about $37 billion. That puts the whisper number in the $39 to $40 billion range. So those are some pretty tough hurdles. And Nicole, it's interesting. On the last quarter they reported, which is second quarter 25, they did beat expectations. They upped guidance, but it wasn't enough, and the stock sold off. So, it is a tough situation where the bar seems so high that unless they beat by over $3 billion, the street is not going to be satisfied, even though, we're looking for 100% growth on their data center business on this third quarter. So it's stellar growth, but, the metrics are just set so high right now.
And I think you made the point, right? So we see a sell-off. People were disappointed. It wasn't more than the whisper numbers and things like that. But they are seeing incredible growth. And then what happened? It's at new highs again. So, at some point, people were back on the Nvidia train. And that's the question. So even if the numbers could be disappointing today, I mean, imagine they don't meet the numbers. I mean, you have that scenario. How likely is that scenario? Do you think a meet or beat is the likely scenario?
Yeah, I think, I expect them to meet expectations. I'm very optimistic. And, Nicole, what's kind of interesting is I think the street's going to be really zeroing in on Blackwell. That's their new chip that's going to be replacing their Hopper. We know on the second quarter they expected or came out and said we're going to do several $billion in revenue on Blackwell on this third quarter. The street's looking for about $6 to $7 billion on the Blackwell. So let's say, they come in with a beat in terms of consensus estimates on the third and fourth quarter in terms of revenue, but they don't quite beat the whisper number. But then let's say, Nicole, they come in and have a blowout Blackwell number in terms of revenues and say, hey, we did 10 billion out of 29 billion in data center revenues just out of Blackwell. I think the street would get really excited about the stock. So there are a lot of other metrics other than that top line growth. But I agree with you, Nicole, and that is that, if the stock does sell off, it does create an opportunity because it's still a stellar growth story and they still are the poster child for AI chips in the semiconductor area.